And because we've got so many interesting things to listen to and hear and see tonight, I would like to introduce our guest speaker, Chris Roxburgh. He is a writer, a photographer, a videographer, and he's also a conservatory person that cares very much about our Great Lakes as far as plastics. I was real interested in seeing that today. Chris.
Thank you. Just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I'm kind of new here to Fife Lake, but I'm 5th generation in Traverse City. My great-great-grandfather was a Traverse City pharmacist at Roxburgh Drugs. Traverse City, I kind of outgrew it. I like it more in the quiet outskirts area. It was very refreshing to move out here, and it's only about 30 minutes from where I was living downtown Traverse City. So, I thank everybody that I've met. Everybody's had an open heart out here. Very easy to talk to, neighborly, a lot different than Traverse City can be. So, probably going to be here for a long time. I bought an old historical home here in Fife Lake, built in 1900, and I'm currently restoring it. But anyway, my name is Chris Roxburgh, and I'm an underwater photographer and author. And I've been doing photography with diving for only about 10 years. I got into it and kind of dove deep, as they say. Right into it. Within my first year, I had made national and state news and many articles of things that I was doing underwater, the videos and stuff. And within 2 years, I was starting to write a book called Leelanau Underwater, and it's all the shipwrecks in Leelanau County. That's where I grew up in Greilickville, Leelanau County, right in the outskirts of Traverse City. Everything progressed very fast. Within 2 years, I was diving 200-foot deep shipwrecks with trimix and helium. So very advanced diving very fast. I was invited to be on a TV show on History Channel with Don Wildman on Cities of the Underworld, and I covered the Great Lakes Stone Circle, which is an underwater anomaly that's up to 9,000 years old that would have been created before the Ice Age was ended. So when the Ice Age ended, it melted and filled up Grand Traverse East and West Bay as the glaciers receded. They left different things to see underwater with historical value. Some are just walls that a lot of people don't know about. So we have a wall that I train on, and I'll share some pictures of that. In Old Mission Peninsula, and that's where the glaciers receded and left natural walls that started about 150 feet and go down to 625 feet. Not a lot of people know that East Bay is that deep, but right off of Bluff Road, that's where I do my dive training. I periodically do presentations all over the Midwest and Ohio, mainly at larger events. I used to do a lot of the smaller scale presentations, but I only do a few a year now. I'm a very busy electrical contractor out of Traverse City, and I can only juggle so many things. But this is my passion. I love to do it. I grew up on the water. My parents used to bring me out onto Lake Michigan and Grand Traverse West Bay. So I kind of prepared for this. I didn't even know. As a child, I started swimming in Lake Michigan when I was 5 years old. And my mom ended up getting me swimming lessons, even though I was a very avid and good swimmer, because she felt that I was swimming for hours at a time, and she was worried that if something ever happened, she would look bad and not have given me the swimming lessons. So that's what she told me anyway. So she made me go to the Civic Center back then and take swimming lessons, even though I was very good at swimming. Grew up going to Power Island, almost every weekend of my life until I was a late teenager. And as a child, I would pull myself down on the anchor line and hold my breath at the anchor and see how long I could hold my breath. So I got very comfortable underwater and not breathing underwater, even though I breathe underwater now. But very comfortable with the water in general. So as soon as I started diving, my trim and buoyancy, everything was spot on. You know, I had better trim and buoyancy than my instructors, let's say. And literally, my instructor, my first dive that I got recognition for, my third dive, and I made the cover of the Grand Rapids Free Press and on M Live. I had went out to this car. It's a Ford Pinto. We call it the muscle car because it's covered with zebra mussels. But it's out in Old Mission. Pinto, you know, there's a million different stories about really what happened to it or what may have happened to it. It's Hoffa's car. It's this, it's that. It was actually a car that was in a car accident in the late 70s, or in 79, actually the year that it was made. And they stripped the car. I know the backstory on it, but it was placed out there for an artificial reef for fish. The gas tank was removed, all the oils and stuff like that. So back then, there wasn't much regulation on it, but we went out to visit this car. My instructor, you know, you never stand on the bottom and stir the silt up. You always keep perfect buoyancy and trim in the water, no matter what depth you are, and it always changes at every depth you're at. You have to adjust your levels of air that are in your buoyancy control, your BC, and your dry suit as well. So I had great buoyancy, and it was actually going hypothermic. It was a very long swim for Hazrat Beach, and swam out there. 5 divers, 2 of the divers turned back. These are veteran divers I'm with. I was the only rookie. 2 veteran divers turned back. They had dry suits on, mind you. I had a wetsuit on at the time. I wasn't dry suit certified yet. It's my 3rd dive. They turned back. I about turned back. I was literally freezing. But I just managed to keep course. I swam, you know, to the car, which was still a 20-some minute swim back to Hazrat Beach. So I knew I could have been in trouble. I was literally, I couldn't feel my hands. I was going hypothermic. But I was so excited to see this car underwater that I was coming in. We saw the car. My dive instructor, he's trying to take a picture of it or whatever, you know, and he's starting to slip. Now he's starting to stand. And all this cloud of silt comes up. Huge cloud, boom, up around him. I come in, I sweep in, and I remember I bumped into him, which you don't usually do with diving, but I was a rookie, trying to get my shot. I saw that the silt cloud was coming from my instructor, mind you. Came in, took the shot. My shot made the cover of the Grand Rapids Free Press the next day. Of course, he was a little jealous and pissed off, but you know, he got over it. So yeah, after that, you know, I did a History Channel TV show and stuff, and did several things published by the Smithsonian. Wrote a book, and it kind of, you know, now it's just a nice flow to it. There's a lot of stuff going on back then. So I go out and, you know, document shipwrecks for different historians. I donate pictures. I do presentations. You know, I do it is kind of like a hobby job, but it's something I love to do. So let's get into it. So here's my book, Leelanau Underwater, Exploring Shipwrecks in Leelanau County, the Manitou Passage. Let's explore shipwrecks from high above. So this is a drone shot of a shipwreck. And deep below the surface, 200 feet deep on the Florida shipwreck in Lake Huron. And now we have light penetration down very deep. 15 years ago, it was very dark at that depth. Now the light penetrates past 200 feet in early season because the algae and particulate, there isn't as much because the zebra and quagga mussel infestations, they filtered all the water out. So now the light penetrates further. Before we had a top thermocline that would be full of algae, which it does do that, but it's not till late summer now. But this would be year-round, a healthy Lake Michigan, a healthy Lake Huron, healthy Lake Superior. You know, the visibility wasn't as good 15, 20 years ago. So now we have over 100-foot visibility in the water. It's a good thing for photography, but definitely a bad thing for the environment. So the history of the Great Lakes is just beneath the surface. That was the old pier, North Manitou Island, the lumber pier. And as you can see, the shipping lanes, these are shipping lanes north and south, but they always blended together, so there was a lot of collisions within the shipping lanes because prior to sonar and radar and all this, you know, GPS guided ships that we have now, everybody would rely on maps, and there was no technology. We didn't have cell phones. The sailors would go out. Sometimes they were never heard from again. Nobody knew what happened to them. Lots of collisions because of this. And this is, we didn't have freeways back then in the 1800s. So this is what built the state of Michigan, is the shipping industry. And within that, we have thousands of shipwrecks. There's an estimated 6,000 shipwrecks on the Great Lakes. Wow. And that's a conservative estimate as well. So I've been on hundreds of shipwrecks myself. So I'm going to show you some of my favorites. This is the Typo when it was getting built. This is the first 200-foot deep dive that I did, and I actually did it on air without helium and trimix. It was called extended range diving, and I was the only person locally to get that certification because you weren't breathing helium yet, and narcosis gets very heavy at 180 feet. So nitrogen turns into a drug, a very strong narcotic. So the nitrogen that we breathe, the air we breathe, is 79% nitrogen and 21% oxygen. And as we go deeper and deeper and deeper, that nitrogen, chemically, the molecule of it changes into a narcotic. So that narcotic starts at around 120 feet, 130, a lot of people will start feeling it. 160, 70 feet, 150 feet, some people can't even dive on oxygen that deep without helium, because what helium does is it fills your tissue compartments 200 times faster than nitrogen does, because it's lighter than nitrogen by 200 times. So it fills your tissue compartments, which are your muscles, your skin tissues, your bone tissues that will absorb the nitrogen, which would give you the bends. So the helium comes in and it also chemically blocks the nitrogen from absorbing into your tissues. So your saturation of nitrogen isn't as much. And it also almost completely stops getting narcosis. Narcosis is when the nitrogen becomes a narcotic and it becomes a drug, similar to a drug that you would get before surgery. So if you can imagine taking a drug that you get right before surgery, 200 feet deep, that's basically what nitrogen will do to you. You literally sit there and watch your air run and not even care at all. That's how blown your mind could be. I could handle the narcosis. I've been 225 feet on air, which gets very dangerous because the partial pressure of oxygen becomes too extreme for the lungs to breathe in properly, and it can get you what's called an oxygen hit, and you'll instantly die. There's no coming onto it. There's no getting out of it. There's no hyperbaric chamber like the bends. So I became a trimix diver very fast because I was always kind of pushing the limits of the extended range diving. So this was the first deeper shipwreck that I've been on. And this is on Presqu'Île, so north of Alpena Presqu'Île, not up in Lake Superior Presqu'Île. So there's multiple Presqu'Îles in Michigan. So here's the Typo, and the mast still stands high. And with the cross tree in, the original ropes come down here in the rigging. This is like a scuba diving rope that was placed on there previous to Noah's installation. And right over here, there's a big train wheel with a steel cable with a 400-pound hollow steel ball that we hook up to now so it doesn't hurt in these old historical shipwrecks. The mast, you hit the mast at 135 feet. It's that tall. All the ropes around it are original. So some of these old ropes you'll see in the pictures, I went around and photographed for Noah the ropes on all the shipwrecks so they could get a grant from the state of Michigan to remove those ropes safely. Had money to pay divers and personnel to go out there and get these old ropes off. You can see the new line now here. That's a steel cable, rubber coated, to a huge train wheel that's embedded in the ground. So it's a new design that they did to dive some of these shipwrecks safely. Not all the shipwrecks have mooring lines. So here's the bow and all the original ropes and rigging and one of the masts that fell over. The Typo was a 3-masted schooner that hauled coal around Lake Huron and Lake Michigan. On a foggy night, the typo was struck in the stern by the W.P. Ketchum. The sleeping quarters was in the stern, and 4 out of the 7 got buried in the coal pile and did not make it out. So that just shows the dangers of shipping back then, and what those sailors had to endure. A lot of times the people would overload the ships, so when they did encounter a storm, it was trouble. Money and profit and greed and trying to get things in a quick, timely delivery all played a part in a lot of these shipwrecks' demise, like this one here. So this is inside the hold, and this is the coal, and there's actually skeletal remains back here that I'm not showing in the picture of some of the sailors. Their bones are still sticking out of the coal pile. We went through the whole ship, 260 feet long, through the inside. This is 200 feet deep, and inside, the whole inside is coated with zebra and quagga mussels. That's what all these white mussels are, and they're sharp as razor blades. So imagine going through a tunnel full of razor blades 200 feet deep with a dry suit on. That if it gets caught, you're not going to make it to the surface. It gets pretty serious. But to do this kind of diving, you have to basically just get in like a state of yoga mind almost on the boat and not get stressed out and worry about it, because if you do that, you're increasing your chances of having something happen worse. Your body's not going to act normal, and under stress in that environment, your body's not going to be able to handle the environmental factors that are compiling on your body at that depth. So when you go into it, you're going to have a good dive. You double, triple check everything and just go for it. This is the Autobahn. So it was a wooden masted two-masted schooner that was carrying 401 bars of rail iron on October 21st, 1854, 1:30 a.m. in the morning. The Autobahn was struck by the Defiance in darkness and fog. The Autobahn sank quickly, and the Defiance sank 3 miles later. Both crews were saved. They saved themselves with the lifeboats. Not always how it happens, though. And you can see all these long things here. That's all railroad iron that we're transporting to build the railroad industry before we had freeways. So here's the steering wheel right next to a whiskey bottle. Who knows what happened with that? The steering wheel came off the helm, probably when it hit bottom. Here's all the mast toppled over, and you can see all the rail iron. So they actually had it stacked on the upper deck and in the hold. And you can see it all along around the outside of it. It's like matchsticks. Somebody just threw a box of matchsticks out. And they're all 20 feet long in length. So this is rail iron like we have when the train goes through Fife Lake every day. This might have been some of the rail iron for that. You never know. So this is the rail iron with zebra mussels and silt on it. And it's not too rusted. It was still in really good condition. So there's low oxygen and very cold. So everything, lasts a lot longer at that depth. The zebra mussels are actually breaking down the shipwrecks now because they have a secretion that comes out of the zebra mussel to attach it to the ships. And the secretion is acidic. So it's starting to degrade the shipwrecks faster in the last 15 years than they've been degraded in the last 150 years. And some divers clean some of this stuff off. You can see the color in the whiskey bottle and that. It's a different angle shot there. In 1854, more ships sank than any other previous year, totaling 70 ships, 119 lives, and $2 million in property loss back then, which would be a lot of money now. So this is a darker shot of the same wreck on a different dive, but you can see how much darker it is in late August than diving, in probably June. So the algae comes, The particulate starts in the top thermocline, it blocks the light. It used to be year-round like that. You can see how dark it is. This is almost 180 feet deep. So here's one of the railroad irons. It's stuck right in the bottom. And there's about 12 feet of it sticking out of the bottom. It's pretty cool to see that. There's actually multiple like that. There's another one over here. So the rail iron is stuck right in the bottom like that. And here's the Defiance. So this is what hit the Autobahn. It's an artist rendition. She was a 115-foot long, two-masted schooner carrying grain. Defiance was headed south to Chicago when the Autobahn came out of the fog and smashed into the ship head-on. Both ships sank only a few miles from each other. There's some artifacts, plates and stuff. So anything man-made from that time period, they call artifacts. Here's the bow. This was just completely encrusted with zebra mussels too. You can see them probably 2-3 inches thick. That's the windlass where the anchor used to get brought up on. So in winter, we have freezing spray. And freezing spray was a very dangerous thing when it happened on a ship, because a lot of the ships not only were overloaded, but they were in a storm, and now you got freezing spray, and the ice accumulates over the ship, and it weighs it down even more. So it sank a lot of the ships, the freezing spray did, in our winters, like the November and December ships. So this is a lighthouse in St. Joseph here. It's just completely covered in ice. So you can imagine, you know, a ship that would have ice over it. They used to have big sledgehammers, and they would bust the ice off as they went. But if the weather was too bad, then, you know, you couldn't get all the ice off, and some of these ships sank because of the ice. So the theory of the Cornelia B. Windiet is that she sank from ice accumulation. The crew was never found. She was found in the 90s. Everything was still sitting exactly where it was placed from when the sailors had it from the day it went down. The only way that would have happened, even inside the cabin, the cups were upright, everything was in place. Everything must have been completely frozen. Inside and out. Spray got in everything, froze everything, washed all the sailors off board. A lot of people think she continued to sail as a ghost ship with no sailors on board, because they thought that this is by Presqu'île as well, so north of Alpena. They thought that she had went down either in the Straits of Mackinac or before that, Lake Michigan, possibly by Beaver Island. So somehow this crew made it around the corner, past Mackinac Island, started coming around, you know, didn't even make it to Alpena. And the ship was found with 0 crew or remains as well. And the lifeboats were not even deployed. They were still right next to the ship, so the ropes had rotted, and the lifeboats were sitting perfectly in the bottom, right here. And these are the ropes that used to hold up the lifeboat. And the lifeboat sank, and you can see the pulley here, and there's one in the back, the pulley blocks that she used to hang off of, the wheel, helm, and then the cabin and the rudder. This is one of my favorite shipwrecks. Friend of mine, Meredith, she had an idea to get a shot of the wheel with the light coming through it as she shined the lifeboat. And it was just her and I. Some other people were on the other part of the ship, but here's how the shot came out. Great idea, Meredith. Here's the lifeboat. The pulley block is still attached. You can see it as Mike shines the light on it. And you can see the light coming out of the cabin. I dive with a cave diver. He's advanced trimix, like one of the best divers, you know, I could possibly dive with and know. He always disappears, and the next thing you know, he's in the shipwreck and lights are coming out of it. You know, it's like, all right, I know where Lee is at least. See the bubbles coming out of the cabin here. And this guy's on a rebreather. There's bubbles coming off of him because he probably released some of the air out of his buoyancy control. So rebreathers, you rebreathe your own air and it filters out the CO2. And you can rebreathe your own air so you can stay underwater for hours. So a lot of the technology is moving to the rebreather, but it's all controlled off computer. And I'm kind of old school, so it's like I like valves and stuff I can turn and pull regulators out I can handle. There is a lot of deaths a year on rebreathers, but I think it's because so many people are doing it now. I don't think it's necessarily because they're any more dangerous than open circuit, what I do with tanks. So when I go down, I have 4 big tanks on me. 50% oxygen, 100% oxygen, and Trimix, which is 17% oxygen and 40% helium. And so I'm very heavy and very cumbersome. Rebreather diving, eventually I'll probably get into it as well. But right now I'm comfortable with what I do with the tools that I have. So here's Meredith illuminating the wheel. You can see the cross tree. So this is the only shipwreck that I know of in all the Great Lakes that has the full cross tree still attached with the ropes. And I heard that it's falling or it had fallen. Just recently, I just heard that. So the bowsprit is broke. So she probably landed bow first and the bowsprit broke off like this and came back on the ship. The bowsprit's over 20 feet long. That's what sticks off the front of the ship. This is the Norman. It's a 296 foot long bulk freighter. The Norman sank on May 30th, 1895 while carrying coal after a violent collision with the freighter Jack. Here's the Norman. This is some of my first choreographed shots. So we actually were talking about what we were going to shoot maybe down there and how we were going to do it. But at 200 feet, everything's fluid and moving. So you don't have much time. And it depends where you're at on how the picture is going to frame and stuff. So it's a fluid moving thing. It's not like on land where you can just stand somewhere with a tripod and take 300 shots. Here I'm actually moving with the group of divers, and we move down to the front and we go all the way to the back. It was a 300 foot long shipwreck, and we did the whole thing in one dive and went into the engine room. We had about 47 minutes of decompression on mixed gas, which would have been about 2 hours of decompression on oxygen. So it was a pretty serious dive. So when you're done with the dive, you get back to your cable, or rope that you're going to go up on. The dive is not done by any means. It's actually one of the more dangerous parts of the dive because on your decompression, if you have anything happen, you cannot go to the surface. So because you've been down underwater for so long, you accumulated so much nitrogen, it's like cracking a Coke. If you shake it up and crack it open, it's going to spurt everywhere and fly everywhere. If you shake a Coke up and slowly crack it, it's not going to make a mess, right? Well, that's what your body does, basically. So if you were to fly to the surface, all that nitrogen is just going to fly out of your tissues and give you the bends and kill you or put you in the hospital, paralyzed. There's many things that can happen to you. So we come up very slow. And then I use a mixed gas. And 100% oxygen, you have to have a special permit to get. It's highly flammable and explosive, but you can breathe it at 20 feet deep. No deeper than that, though, because the partial pressure oxygen become too great. So if you breathe 100% oxygen, it flushes your body with 100% oxygen, and it's actually very good for you because a lot of hospitals do it for different medical treatments and stuff. So it's kind of like you're on therapy as you come up, breathing the super pure 100% oxygen. But as you can see, the different ways of lighting in different Kelvin ranges, color temperatures of light, wide beam, and a spotlight, and how we can change the look of the picture by changing the position of the divers and the lighting. I don't use any filters, totally self-taught. I do it a lot differently than a lot of people do, but I like things to look how I see them. Very little editing, maybe to clean some of the blurriness out in some of the shots, but the water is super clear, especially like early season. It's about 34 to 39 degree water at the bottom. So you're literally, in freezing cold water, which makes it very clear. This is the stern of the Norman, embedded into the lake bottom, which is clay and sand. Here's the rudder and prop sticking in the bottom. Here's one of the ship's lights. So this is one of the early ships that had early versions of electricity. So they don't build light bulbs nowadays how they used to, because that bulb is still intact. And that bulb is under 8 atmospheres of pressure.
Wow.
So for that bulb not to implode is very impressive, and it was not full of water. All the old light bulbs that I've seen are usually full of air still. If you were to take one of our cheap China-made light bulbs nowadays, you know, down at this depth, it would probably implode, I would say, at 70 to 100 feet. You know, this is 200 feet deep, and they're still in perfect condition. So the pilot house usually blows off the ships when they sink very fast because the air gets trapped inside of it and rips the pilot house off. So here's the pilot house sitting next to the Norman, and there's the wheel, the helm. And it literally went down so fast that it just ripped the pilot house off. And you can see the collision, how big of a gash it has. It basically broke the ship right in half. Here we are going inside of the break. Here's the lifeboat. The oars are still in there. The lifeboat, a lot of people have asked, how do the oars not float? How did the lifeboat not float? Well, it was tied to the ship. It got pulled down with the ship. And then the oars are made of wood, and so is the lifeboat as well. And the cellular level of the wood under that much pressure from the water, the wood becomes saturated much faster. 8 times faster than it would just floating in water. Plus, probably even faster than that because the pressure is actually pushing the water into the wood. So over time, you know, this lifeboat was probably up here, floating on ropes still attached, and then it slowly settled, and the ropes rotted away from the ship. There's another shot of the lifeboat. This was just a lucky shot. I was waiting for another diver, Liz, and she was coming through kind of slow, and Lee was going really fast like he does. And sometimes you get a cool, you know, lucky shot like that where you got a diver illuminating something. You know, he's probably 60 feet away from me too. So this incredible visibility. Some people think these are AI shots and all that. No, this is all like, you know, legitimate photography. No AI. I've never used AI. So here's inside the engine room. So these are some of the gauges and stuff. And the conductor's hat is right here, stuck around a solenoid. So he's one of the person that the sailor that owned that hat was one of the people that went down. Here's the telegraph. So that's how they used to communicate to the bow, to the engine in the back, was a telegraph. And then there was a telephone. And so everything kind of, you know, as technology progressed, it got easier to communicate. So the pilot, the captain driving the ship at the front in the pilot house would pull a lever, and then it would tell the telegraph, it would move, it would say astern, you know, forward, reverse, different things the arrow would go to. So the guy in the engine room would know what to do. And that's how they communicate, because the ship is 300 feet long. This is the Florida. This was the second biggest wooden freighter built in her time, and she got sank by the largest wooden freighter built in its time, the George Roby. And this was a massive, basically a giant UPS truck. You know, because back then they would ship goods for stores, people would ship stuff as well, you know. So it was commerce, there was personal stuff, you know, giant FedEx truck. The Florida is a wooden package freighter that sank on May 21st, 1897. She was in a collision with a larger George Roby and sank within minutes. The crew was saved by the George Roby. Here's the bow. This is the impact site. All 3 stories smashed in by the George Roby. The George Roby went on to sail and sank another ship 2 years later. Both times the captain was at fault, traveling too fast in conditions. It was fogging at night. Here's a barrel still full of, you know, flour or something. A lot of the stuff that had the liquids like whiskeys and oils in it You can see all the slats here and the metal bands that used to band it together, all the barrels. This was all like whiskey and oil and different stuff, liquid stuff like that. This is all flour. So it's like these, looks like a big giant marshmallow now. But this is all flour, and the bands and barrels are broke down. These are all full of flour as well. And they just stack all these barrels and stuff on top of each other inside this. So this is where the stern hit so hard that the boiler engine rolled right out. And if you really know where to look, you can look where he's shining the light, and that's the ship's bell in the debris field. That's a hard one to find. I did not know that was there until Mike showed me where that was. This is inside, looking down inside the boiler, the engine. So this is where the smokestack used to come out of. Here's the smokestack with a star still on it. So it's a big steel welded star that's on the side of it. These are teapots from the 1800s that were in a crate. The crate is now broke down and the teapots have exposed themselves. A lot of these artifacts from this shipwreck and other shipwrecks that I'm sharing in the Thunder Bay area are on display at the Thunder Bay NOAA Museum. And if you guys ever go to Alpena, definitely visit the museum. Very cool historical information and shipwrecks there, and artifacts from a lot of these shipwrecks. Here's one of the ship's lanterns. We got a light shining into it. It's red. Now this was a big toolbox, so this would have been like the first Craftsman toolbox ever made. But these were drawers that would pull out, so like a big toolbox, and then everything's just stacked on top of it. There's big pots and pans and cooking pots on top, and there's barrels, and just kind of, they filled up these ships like Tetris, just where everything would go in place. You can see the barrels. So when it sank so fast that the barrels filled, the ones with flour, a lot of them had air in them still, and they stuck to the ceiling of the deck. So this is inside the ship, and the barrel slats are starting to peel away from the flour that's still inside. And the flour is still like this gelatinous blob that's in these barrels. Really cool. I've never seen anything like it. There's a bunch of them right there. It looks like burnt marshmallows. These are some pressure gauges in the steam engine. So while I'm in that area, I do geology photography as well. I like to explore geology, whether it be up at Pictured Rocks or Alpena. Alpena has some very unique geology that's unlike any geology in the Great Lakes. They have sinkholes. So this is the Middle Island sinkhole. This is a sinkhole that's 300 foot across, and it goes 70 feet deep. And there's only a few sinkholes like this in the world. In the bottom of it, there's purple algae mats that only grow in a low oxygen, high, there's like tannins that go in the water from the underwater streams that feed into the sinkhole, and it makes these purple algae mats, and they're like teardrops. They come off the bottom and the sunlight's out, and then they flatten back out at night. When we were there, the teardrops hadn't started yet. It was early in the morning, but there are some pictures of it online. So here's the edge of it, and it's literally just, straight down. Here's us descending into it. So here's some of the purple algae mats, and it's called cyanobacteria. And there's scientists that come to this sinkhole from all over the world to study it, because it's very unique. Something looks like off of a nightmare, a scary movie, but it's actually just an algae mat with a hole in it, and that's a vent hole, so the water comes out of it, and then the algae grows around the vent holes because it has a lot of tannins and minerals and stuff from the underwater springs. So when I'm going out and see shipwrecks, I'm always, if there's a sinkhole or if there's cool geology in the area I'm near, I'm definitely going to it. I'm just as interested, in the geology as the shipwreck. So I've always been into geology my whole life. This is the metropolis in Old Mission Peninsula. So this is some of the drone photography that I do. There's my boat, my dogs, Jacqueline's on there. But you can see how good you can see through the water now. And if you're at a shipwreck site and you throw a drone up and it's shallow, like 30 feet or less deep, so 30, 20, 10 feet, this is about 12 feet deep, you can literally see the whole wreck site and see other areas that you might not see if you're just snorkeling around a wreck or something like that in the water. But this is just an old mission. This is the metropolis underwater. The crew made it to shore and walked 11 miles in a blizzard to Traverse City. Yeah, they didn't have Uber back then. And there was no way for them to let anybody know they're in trouble either because there wasn't telephones and stuff like that. So this is the wall. This is, I was talking about this, the first beginning of the presentation, about how the glaciers carved these walls. And as they receded, as the ice age ended, they receded and filled up and made, East and West Bay and filled up Lake Michigan. But these walls started about 150 feet deep and they go down to 600 feet deep. And this is where we do our training. And, you have to have perfect buoyancy because if you don't, you're going to sink to the bottom. And it tiers. It's not just like 150 straight to 600, but it has these walls that kind of tier down. And each tier is probably 100 feet. So it's pretty cool to see. This is just some clay formation that's underwater. A lot of it's clay. This is the Novadoc. The Novadoc was one of 3 Great Lakes freighters lost in the Armistice storm, November 11th, 1940. So that was a famous storm that took out a lot of ships all over the Great Lakes. And 3 of them were in the vicinity of each other, down by Silver Lake sand dunes, down by Muskegon. Captain Steep stayed close to the shoreline to get out of the relentless wind that was lashing the ship. The wind quickly switched and increased, pushing the ship aground just south of Silver Lake sand dunes. After the U.S. Coast Guard refused to help because of the ferocity of the storm, a captain named Clyde Cross decided to try and rescue the crew. After being stranded for 36 hours, the Coast Guard still did not save these people. So this guy took his fishing tug out called the Three Brothers and saved the whole crew of 17. Wow. It is not far offshore, like literally the Coast Guard probably could have went out there. I think it's only 300 feet offshore. I mean, when you're there, you can see people driving their cars on Silver Lake sand dunes. It's literally right there. So as the wind picks up, it reduces the visibility, the clarity we can see through down to the shipwrecks. So a very calm morning is probably the best time to do drone photography. We had pretty good, wind that day for photography. It wasn't too bad, but the calmer it is, the better you can see underwater. So here's the bow and the windlass. Here's the stern. This is the Port Austin Reef Light. And anywhere I go, I'm going around lighthouses as well. Got to learn about the historical information on the lighthouses that help protect, some of the ships that were in the area. And the lighthouse was typically built because of the ships that sank in the area. So I like to go and see the lighthouses. It was built in 1876. The brick lighthouse had an attached fog signal building that helped many ships safely pass the reef. So this is the Daniel J. Morrell, one of the most famous shipwrecks next to the Fitzgerald. Everybody knows about the Fitzgerald, but because of the song and everything is very popular. But the Daniel J. Morrell broke in half. This is an artist rendition of it. So it broke in half, and most of the crew got sucked down by the bow in 200 feet of water. And then a couple people were on the stern, and it continued to go for 5 more miles. The engines continued to run. Broke in half. And then the stern sank. 3 people were on a lifeboat, and 2 people died of hypothermia on the lifeboat. There was only 1 survivor, Dennis Hale. and he just recently died, but he used to do presentations all over the United States about his experience and how terrifying it was to watch everybody die, and then the 2 people die in the lifeboat with him, and somehow, you know, he was rescued. But very dangerous in the Great Lakes. So these are the 2 sections. This is the stern. This is 218 feet deep. We went inside, penetrated the engine room, and I went into the storage hold by myself and swam around and came back up with a dive crew. But really, really cool to see. There's the bow. So 23 sailors got pulled down with the bow. And it's large too, so it's 200 feet deep, the bow, and it comes up over 30 feet. So you're not going the full 200 unless you go, you know, into the hold. Here's inside the hold. This is on the stern. This is the helm, the wheel. A lot of zebra mussels on it. You can see the light bulb still intact once again. Made in America. Light bulbs and jars of nuts and bolts still inside the engine room. So they would take the jar tops, the lids, and screw them to the structures, the decks within the engine room, and then they would screw the jar into it, and that was how it held in place with all the waves and all the nuts and bolts, and each jar would be labeled individually for what it carried. Here's the telegraph. So this is again what it would tell the guys in the engine room what to do. Here's the engine room. And it got really silty. I kind of got in and got out of there. It got a little too silty for me. Plus, I was 218 feet deep in these shots here. So it gets pretty serious inside of a shipwreck that deep. This is the lifeboat, the Daniel J. Morrell. This is the Detroit, so a side wheel steamer. This is the most intact side wheel steamer shipwreck in the entire world. It's located near Port Austin. The side wheel steamer Detroit collided with the brig Nucleus in heavy fog on May 25th, 1854. She was bound to Detroit from Chicago with 2 lumber scows in tow. So 2 lumber scows were getting towed by a side wheel steamer. What could go wrong, right? So the side wheel and the ladder, everything is still perfectly intact. Here's one of the side wheels. You can see underneath and above here. This is 200 feet deep. The anchors still hang off the bow. So we're going to jump over to the Manitou Passage for Port Austin now. I'm back up in the Manitou Passage. I'm all over Michigan. Almost usually, you know, a couple times a month I'm visiting new places. I used to do it like every weekend, but you know, I got to work too. So this is South Manitou Lighthouse. The light helped many ships navigate around South Manitou Island from 1871 to 1958. And you can still go inside it today, public. This is a replica Fresnel lens that's in there. I believe the original one was shot out by somebody many years ago. Somebody shot a gun at it, I think. And you can hunt on the island as well. So it could have been a hunter, but who knows. But they to make a Fresnel lens like this would be over $1 million to make it like it was made back then, nowadays. So they had a replica made. I don't know how much it was, but it was not $1 million. Probably very expensive, probably $30,000 or $40,000. This is the Congress. So the Congress caught on fire at South Manitou Dock. The Congress was a 265-foot long steamer that caught fire at South Manitou Dock and was pushed away to burn and sink in South Manitou Harbor. So the whole ship was on fire. They pushed it off the dock, and it sank in 165 foot of water. This is Ray Wilson and Dusty Clifton illuminating the bow. A couple divers I dive with. There's the steam engines. The steam engines are one of the most intact part of it because they're metal, they didn't burn. But they come up off the bottom over 20 feet. This is another shipwreck out of South Manitou Island. And when I go do shipwrecks, I kind of cover different areas because it's like, you know, you bring a boat somewhere, it's an all-day affair, you dive, you know, check out these different ships. Usually, you know, I could go over 100 miles in a day on a boat. lot of area. I mean, just a Fox Island itself, or like Manitou's, around the Manitou's and back, you're going over 50 miles in a day. I think it's 16 miles to North Manitou and farther to south, and then you go around both islands and go to different shipwrecks. So this is the Francisco Morazan. This is on South Manitou Island, Lake Michigan. This is what it looks like today. So it's one of the only shipwrecks that's still intact that sticks out of the water in the Great Lakes. The ice hits them. So this is on the south side of the island, so it's somewhat protected from the north wind and the ice sheets. But the bow and stern are now in the water. The bow is underwater now, so this is called the over-under shot, where you're underneath and overhead. The Francisco Morazan was lost in 1960 after grounding on the South Manitou Shoal. It actually ran over another shipwreck. Probably the only ship that ran over another shipwreck in the Great Lakes. So it ran over the Walter Frost, and this is the Walter Frost stuck in the frost. The Walter L. Frost in South Manitou Island. They're only a couple hundred feet from each other. The Francisco Morazan got in a gale wind. It ran aground, it bottomed out, and it hit the other shipwreck and flattened it. And both wrecks are right near each other now. So this is the Walter Frost. Sank in November 4th, 1903, after hitting the shoal, the same South Manitou Shoal. So this is a drone shot of it. This is the Alva Bradley, another wreck off of North Manitou Island. She was a three-masted schooner, 192 feet long, and wrecked off Donner Point, North Manitou Island, during a gale October 13th, 1894. She was known to be one of the most beautiful schooners in her time ever built on the Great Lakes, until she sank. This is the Alva Bradley today. They call this, some people call this the schooner fillet. The schooner opens up over time and exposes its hull in midsection. Her cargo was steel billets, and you can see some of them around the wreck site still. A lot of this artifacts, the billets, the different, a lot of steel products, stars and stuff, probably meant for farms. Decorations, they were removed from people stealing artifacts and stuff off there prior to 1985, when the Michigan Shipwreck Bottomlands laws went into effect. Now you can't remove any of the artifacts. So it's nice that on the deeper wrecks, a lot of the artifacts still remain, because the guys salvaging these wrecks weren't going 200 feet deep to do it. But a lot of the shallow ones are completely stripped out and salvaged. A lot of furniture was made. I know a guy that has a table made with the rudder from the Rising Sun. It was legally obtained before 1985. And some of the chains used as the legs. Beautiful furniture, but I like it that, everything's left alone now. They're only going to be around for so long. So this is the Rising Sun, the Manitou Passage, Lake Michigan off of Pyramid Point. The Rising Sun was going south for the winter from Summer Island, which is right off of High Island and Beaver Island, in the Beaver Island Archipelago Island range, with farmers and their harvest when it struck a shoal at Pyramid Point. You would also go, they would bring you out to High Island, is where they started farming, and it was a religious sect out of Benton Harbor. And if you broke the rules of the community, you would become a farmer on Summer or High Island for no pay all summer. And they were coming back with a load of potatoes and hit the shoal. It was owned by the House of David in Benton Harbor. Here's the Rising Sun, one of the original pictures from back then. Here's the Rising Sun today, Pyramid Point. And you can see all that's left is a boiler and just some of the strongest parts of the wreck, the hull there. Here's the prop. Two of the blades are broke off, probably where it hit ground, they broke off. Here's the boiler. This is the Westmoreland. This is, to me, one of the more famous shipwrecks. Not a lot of people know about it, but it's in the Manitou Passage as well. It's a private wreck site. She was carrying 10,000 Gold Eagle coins, worth millions today, winter provisions, and 280 barrels of whiskey for the garrison station in Fort Mac. I guess that winter of 1854 was the hardest winter that anybody had at Fort Mac. Fort Mackinac had a garrison army that didn't get their money, winter provisions, and most importantly, their whiskey. So I would not want to have been around on that island that year. Everything went down on the Westmoreland. It's a private site. There's only a handful of people that have been granted permission, coordinates to dive it. I was to take photographs, got lucky to dive it. So only 17 of the 34 sailors made it to shore. There was reportedly 20-foot waves in the Manitou Passage with 60-mile-an-hour winds and a blizzard. The boiler already had a leak in the hull somewhere. It was leaking. The storm made it so bad that it filled the engine room up with water, extinguished the boilers. Sometimes they explode and kill everybody as well, but they didn't explode. But the ship lost steering because of it. It turned sideways and was quickly pulled under, and only one lifeboat was deployed, and 17 sailors made it to shore. 2 more people died right there in shore of hypothermia. And then the rest of the people had to walk 40 miles to the nearest town to Manistee. Brutal. In a blizzard, too. Nowadays, I don't think people would make it the way people are nowadays. They'd probably just shrivel up and die like before they even got ashore. You know, the men back then were like, you know, they made of steel, these sailors. Here's the anchor. This is the Bermuda up in Munising, one of my favorite places to go, Lake Superior. The Bermuda was a 130-foot long schooner. On October 15th was lost. They believe that one of the forecastles blew in and all the water came in and killed everybody on board in Murray Bay. This is in Lake Superior. So this is in the Munising Visitors Bureau. I did their brochure. I did photography for it, all the shipwrecks and stuff for them. The deck is only 10 feet deep, making it great for beginner divers and snorkelers. And the bottom's about 30 feet deep. So here's, go past Grand Island. We stopped at the Bermuda. Let's go to Autrain with the boat. We stopped at the Autrain Cave, which you can't get to by land now because of the landowner that owns a piece of property that the road goes down. Too many people were trashing the property, defacing the rocks, the cave. They also, you know, there's stories about this cave back Native American days as well that I've heard. So the owner shut down the road so the public can't get to this cave anymore, but you can get to it on the boat, and it's actually public property here, and it used to be a campground above it, behind it. But the guy got so sick of people trashing his property, throwing garbage out everywhere, and then he just shut down the road, so everybody just ruined it for themselves. But you can still get to it on the water. So this is a cave off of another island called Williams Island. I was just out there having fun with my girlfriend and my daughter. This is Athena. This is my girlfriend, Jacqueline. She's here tonight somewhere. And my daughter, Athena. I brought her out there. It was just a really amazing place. Wanted to show, you know, her the geology and the caves and stuff around these areas. This is under Miners Castle. So if anybody's been to Munising and went to Miners Castle and go to the overlook and the beach and all that, this is underneath. There's actually pillars underwater with caves you can swim through. Really cool. This is all the geology of the sandstone, different layers of it. So we're going to shoot over the Mackinac Bridge. This is the Eberward in the Straits of Mackinac, the 213-foot long wooden bulk package freighter that sank after hitting ice April 20th, 1909. So late season ice. It's hauling corn, 140 feet deep. It's in remarkable condition. Has unique features like the mushroom anchor that a lot of ships back then didn't have. I doubt that the mushroom anchor did anything substantial to hold the ship, but probably in calm conditions it would. This is where the ice hit, and it actually went through the entire ship. So the bow here was the strongest part of the ship. The ice wrapped around and punched right through, and it sank within, I think, 5-10 minutes. Natural lighting illuminating into the ship. The burbot circling the boiler. We call it the Burbot Hotel. You go in there, there's a lot of burbots. Try not to stir them up. They always want to swim around you, and they're pretty much blind. They have a whisker that comes off their chin. They hunt with vibration. and they have opaque eyes. They're pretty much blind. One of the sailors' boots is right behind the windlass here. Sometimes you see that stuff, and it just reminds you how dangerous it was back then to do the shipping. Here's the stern. This is one of the first pictures I took with my new camera back when it was new, and it wasn't even new when it was new. I got an older Sony Alpha 7, but it does really good in lower light conditions. And I got a really expensive dive housing. That's what I spent my money on. Nowadays the technology is so much better, but it does great in low light. So this is the Cayuga, Straits of Mackinac, Lake Michigan. Only one of 5 early steel sister ships. She was carrying grain and general merchandise when she encountered dense fog. The Joseph L. Hurd collided with her and sank within 25 minutes. So this ship was, it's like by Wilderness State Park and Cross Village area. So like the beginning of the Straits of Mackinac. These are the floats they tried to use to raise it. And there's a barge next to it, and there's still a hard hat diver stuck underneath the barge. So one man died after countless failed salvage attempts. And these huge aluminum pontoons, I mean, they're massive. They're 20 feet long and like 8 feet around. They were trying to raise the ship unsuccessfully. And inside, here's a door, and the silt's very deep. It's about 3.5 feet deep, the silt inside, very silty. This is one of the logs up here that they put into the hole to brace and try to pull the ship up with the floats. And they just could not get it. Large timbers, you can see the chains still wrapped around them. They're all rusty. So this is White Shoal. So the Cayuga, you come around, you see the Cayuga, and this is White Shoal. That's why they call it White Shoal. So it's a huge reef that's way out 20 miles west of the Mackinac Bridge in the middle of nowhere. And ships would come through and they'd bottom out on the shoal. And then they would sink not too far after that. Oops. Skip through this here, sorry, wrong button. We're gonna shoot over the Cedarville. So that's the next shipwreck down the line. True ghost ship that took the lives of 10 sailors and 10 divers. So the diver that just recently died, you saw that on the news just recently, was on this wreck. It was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. People go inside, they get displaced. He actually had a medical emergency. I think he had a heart attack, but I almost died on it. So it's definitely a scary ship. I think Josh Gates did a dive on it with a crew on one of his shows. It's supposed to be the most haunted shipwreck in the Great Lakes or whatever. There's actually a big burbot right here. You see him looking at us? Big fat one. And the sink is sideways because the ship is actually somewhat upside down. So here's a telephone which would replace the telegraph. You'd call. Here's where I got stuck in the engine room for a very short period of time. It was very scary. It was the same place my instructor told me he got stuck when he was younger. So I just remained calm and worked my way out of my situation. I think I got stuck on a conduit in the back of my scuba tanks. Here's some of the old computers for the generators and stuff, some of the old dials. And I want to thank everybody for coming to my presentation. So this is South Fox, and I usually would include some of these rocks, but for an hour I can only talk about so much. Plus I kind of go on about some stories here and there on the fly. But if you guys want to see more of this, I'm on Facebook. I got a page with like 83,000 followers, and very active page. Get about 1 million hits a month, and I'm always sharing stuff from stuff I've done in the past, stuff I do now. This is Fox Island. I documented every shipwreck around Fox, South Fox, North Manitou, South Manitou, the Beaver Islands. And I share, all that stuff, different things that, I encounter, geology, videos. My dogs are in a lot of the stuff I do. I got a pug and a border collie. They love going out, and they love going peeing on trees on islands that nobody goes to really. So, but yeah, this is one of my favorite places. And if you guys ever want to go out to Fox Island, they do a program where you can go paint and do stuff for the Lighthouse Association, and they'll bring you out there. And the old historical lighthouse is in the back here, and that's where you'd stay. And there's rooms in there, and then this is the skeleton light, it's called, and it's the same light that's on Sanibel Island. So that big hurricane that wiped out Sanibel Island in Florida and knocked two of the legs off of the lighthouse, that's the exact replica of the skeleton light that's on Sanibel Island in Florida, and this is out in South Fox. So yeah, lots of fun stuff, but I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and I hope everybody has a great night. If anybody has any questions, feel free. Anybody's got any questions, like, we can do that, You can always send me a message too, but is it anybody? Yes.
All of the mussels that you've showed us.
Yeah.
Is that dangerous to the ecosystem?
Very.
Yeah.
Very. So they're from Russia and Ukraine, of course. From those ships, though, they were there, native species there that came in. They got sucked into the ballast of ships from Russia, and they came through and they were deposited in the Great Lakes. It started out with zebra mussels, and the zebra mussel population is pretty much dead. But the more robust, larger, stronger, deeper going, 1,000 feet deep, they found them. Quagga mussel, it's the cousin of the zebra. They basically encapsulate the zebra mussels. They stick to them even, and kill those off. But it's the quagga mussels and zebra mussels that have devastated the Great Lakes.
Is there anything that they can do to try to eradicate them or minimize?
They're still trying to figure it out, but they don't want to do something that's going to also hurt everything else that's already been affected by it. So we have sea fleas that are like a little flea that's in the water. They get caught in the gills of the fish. It's a very invasive species, and some of the fishermen, they'll pull the lines up, they'll be stuck to the lines, like out in Lake Michigan. The lamprey eels are still very bad. You don't hear much about them nowadays, but they almost wiped out the whitefish population around Isle Royale and other areas that a lot of natives, I love whitefish, we get whitefish all the time. It's getting more scarce. The whitefish hauls from the natives and stuff, they used to just come up with thousands of these fish, and they're lucky if they get hundreds in there now. And on top of, and there's literally like a multitude of different invasive species, but like the sea fleas get caught in the gills, kill the fish, the lampreys kill them, and then the zebra mussels filter out all the particulate in the water, making the photography really good, right? Because the visibility is really good. But it filters out all the algae and food from the whole food chain of the Great Lakes. So everything is affected from the start from that. And then you got all this other stuff killing our fish as well. When I was a child, like 5 years old, 10 years old, even when I was like 15, snorkeling, well before I started diving, you'd see seaweed everywhere. Like we have here in Fife Lake, like it's healthy, right? Like you go out in Lake Michigan and it's like rocks, and all the rocks are all covered with zebra mussels and algae. And there's algae that is toxic algae, and it dies and creates avian botulism that kills over 9,000 birds a year in the Manitou Passage. And you got all these things going on now, that you didn't have when I was, younger. I mean, I'm 46 now, so it hasn't been that long, but I've even seen this huge change in water, in my lifetime. And I actually saw that in the ocean too. Not many people being able to see that. Like my parents would bring me down to Florida and I'd snorkel coral reefs for hours. I'm lucky my skin isn't burned off my back, but like I would be by myself swimming because I'm an only child out in the ocean for hours. It was easy because I was like your babysitter. You go swim with the sharks or whatever. But like back then, the same thing happened. The John Penncamp Coral Reef, the coral reef systems around Florida, it was beautiful. It was just so amazing to see, and it all changed as well. So our oceans are warming, and the bleaching, and we have the oceans, our Great Lakes are warming. So the same things are happening two different places in the United States and the world, all over the world really, but like here, our lakes are warming too. So like Lake Superior hit its record temperature last year, 72 degrees. Lake Superior, that was unheard of. It's rare. And what it's doing is creating that toxic algae. So we're getting these algae blooms we've never seen before, killing, and the algae rots and it makes avian botulism. So if any of our dogs drink the water, eat the algae, the fish, the ducks, if you see a duck with its head bent over and floating in the water in Lake Michigan, it ate a fish that ate the algae, or it nibbled on a zebra mussel that had the algae, and it kills the swans. You know, I see birds that are just slumped over in the water, floating, like out in the middle of nowhere, and they got into that algae. And what it does, it paralyzes them, and they drowned. But yeah, there's a lot of changing stuff, and I do a lot of photography on that sort of stuff too, and donate. You know, when people are investigating stuff like that, like call me, hey, what's going on in the water? You know, you can take some pictures. Sure, plastic pollution stuff. Done a lot of plastic pollution stories like Detroit Free Press and M Live. You know, and we have, you know, definitely a plastic pollution problem as well. And I'd love to do some more of that this year. I need to get in the water and start, you know, hauling some plastic out and stuff. So.
Well, I'm sure you're gonna have a lot more followers on your
Great, yeah.
website.
Message me, get a hold of me, you know.
Thank you very much. If
Thank
anybody
you.
wants to come up and ask more questions, Chris, he'll be open.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.